The sons of God, witnesses before creation. Imagine standing at the edge of time itself, before the first human heartbeat, before Eden's first bloom. The universe is vast and ancient, but it was not empty. They were there, watching, waiting, rejoicing. In 2023, archaeologists at Göbekli Tepe unearthed stone tablets depicting radiant beings descending from the stars. Carbon dating placed them at 11,000 years old, thousands of years before writing was supposedly invented. The scientific community called it symbolic art. But what if it wasn't symbolism? What if it was history, a record of entities the Bible calls the sons of God? Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Job 38:7. This single verse shatters our understanding of creation. These weren't humans. Adam hadn't yet been formed. These weren't metaphors. The Hebrew term Bene Elohim is specific and literal. These were celestial beings, divine witnesses standing in God's presence as he sculpted galaxies and ignited stars. But who exactly were these sons of God? Modern theology has reduced them to generic angels, harmless messengers with harps and halos. But Scripture paints a far more stunning portrait. These were beings of cosmic power and authority, luminous, mighty, conscious entities who existed before time began. In Psalm 82, we glimpse something extraordinary, a divine council where the Most High addresses these celestial beings, calling them gods, Elohim, and judges of the earth. In Daniel 10, we see them assigned as princes over nations, wielding authority that can even challenge archangels. These weren't decorative ornaments of heaven, they were its administration. And among them, one shone brightest of all, Lucifer, the morning star, the light-bearer. Try to comprehend his original splendor. Ezekiel 28 describes a being perfect in beauty, adorned with every precious stone. But this wasn't jewelry. His very essence was crafted from cosmic gemstones. Emerald eyes that could pierce any secret, ruby flesh pulsing with the light of dying stars, a voice that could sing galaxies into resonance. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you. Ezekiel 28 verse 12 to 15. This wasn't the Eden of Adam and Eve. This was a celestial paradise that predated humanity. A realm where Lucifer served as the anointed cherub, the highest of God's created beings, deputized with breathtaking authority. But something happened, a cosmic fracture that would ripple through eternity. Most assume Lucifer fell because of pride, his desire to be like God. But what if there was a deeper catalyst? What triggered his sudden jealousy after eons of faithful service? Here is the revelation scholars fear. It wasn't just pride. It was God's announcement of a new creation, humanity, that would receive something the angels never had. When God formed Adam, Scripture says he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. The Hebrew word ruach means both breath and spirit. This wasn't ordinary respiration, it was divine impartation. God placed a fragment of his own essence into these dust creatures. No angel, not even Lucifer, had received such an honor. Imagine the shock that rippled through the heavenly courts. Beings of light and perfection who had served faithfully since before time, watching as God took dust, worthless dust, and not only shaped it in his image, but breathed his very nature into it. This wasn't just creation, this was adoption, this was inheritance. And something in Lucifer snapped. I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Most High. Isaiah 14:13-14. These 5 declarations of I will weren't just ambition, they were the first independent will ever exercised against the Creator. The perfect unity of heaven shattered as Lucifer's rebellion metastasized, infecting a third of the angelic host with his toxic vision. And then, war. Not metaphorical, not symbolic, but literal cosmic warfare. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. Revelation 12:7-8. Try to comprehend this scene. Beings of light clashing in cosmic combat. Reality itself trembling under the force of their conflict. The archangel Michael, heaven's greatest warrior, leading the loyal hosts against the rebels. No human battle could compare to this primal combat at the dawn of time. The outcome was decisive. Lucifer, now Satan, the adversary, was cast down, not to some metaphorical realm, but to earth. This was no gentle fall. Jesus himself said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven," Luke 10:18. Violent, sudden, catastrophic, and where he fell, destruction followed. The perfect harmony of the original creation shattered. The earth, once pristine, became tohu vabohu, formless and void, words that describe not a planet under construction but one in ruin. This is why Genesis 1:2 describes darkness covering the face of the deep. This wasn't creation in progress. This was the aftermath of celestial war, a battlefield drenched in judgment. Do you see it now? The Bible doesn't begin with the first creation. It begins with recreation, God's divine reset after cosmic rebellion. Let there be light wasn't the first creative act in universal history. It was the beginning of restoration. And the sons of God who remained loyal watched this too. They had witnessed the fall of their brothers. They had seen what pride could do. Now they watched as God began again, crafting something new from the wreckage of rebellion. But the war that began in heaven didn't end with Lucifer's fall. It simply changed venues. Earth became the new battlefield, and humanity, the new prize. The stage was set for the next phase of this cosmic conflict, one that would blur the boundaries between heaven and earth in ways that would alter human history forever. Earth before Adam, the hidden cataclysm. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. These opening lines of Genesis have been read billions of times, yet few have noticed the cosmic catastrophe hidden between these two verses. Most assume they're reading a continuous narrative. First God creates, then shapes an initially formless world. But what if these verses aren't consecutive moments? What if they're separated by a cataclysm so vast it left an entire world in ruins? Let me show you something that traditional theology has missed. In the original Hebrew text, Genesis 1:2 begins with the phrase, V'haaretz hayata tohu v'bohu. While typically translated as, "and the earth was formless and void," there's a critical translation issue. The Hebrew word hayata can be translated as either was or became. This seemingly minor distinction changes everything, and the earth became formless and void. This isn't semantics, it's revelation. The word tohu vabohu appears only 3 times in Scripture, and the other 2 instances, Isaiah 34:11 and Jeremiah 4:23, explicitly describe divine judgment and destruction. This isn't the language of creation in progress, it's the aftermath of catastrophe. In Isaiah 45:18, God declares, "He did not create it, the earth, to be empty, tohu, but formed it to be inhabited." This presents a direct contradiction unless we understand that Genesis 1:1 describes an original creation, and Genesis 1:2 shows us a world that has fallen into judgment and ruin. Consider the evidence hidden in plain sight. In 2018, geologists at the University of Wisconsin discovered evidence of an extinction-level event that predates all known civilizations. The scientific community calls it the Younger Dryas impact. Ancient texts call it judgment. When radiocarbon dated, the evidence aligns perfectly with the timeline suggested by the gap theory. Across every continent, beneath layers of sediment, lie megalithic structures built with technology we still cannot explain. From Göbekli Tepe to the Giza Plateau, from Easter Island to Puma Punku, massive stone blocks cut with laser-like precision, positioned with mathematical perfection, and aligned with celestial bodies in ways that defy primitive capability. Mainstream archaeology offers no coherent explanation for how Stone Age cultures could engineer these marvels. But the gap theory does. These aren't the first attempts of evolving humans. They're the last remnants of a world wiped clean by divine judgment. Ancient texts from every culture echo this hidden history. The Sumerian king list speaks of rulers before the flood, with lifespans of tens of thousands of years. The Mahabharata describes flying machines and weapons of mass destruction. The Egyptian pyramid texts reference a primeval race who knew the words of power. These aren't myths. They're memories of what came before, fragmented records of a world erased from history. But the most compelling evidence comes from the text itself. Genesis 1:2 says, "Darkness was over the surface of the deep." The Hebrew word for darkness here is choshek, not ordinary darkness, but a supernatural darkness associated with divine judgment. The same word appears in Exodus to describe the plague of darkness over Egypt, a darkness so thick it could be felt. This was no gentle nightfall. This was spiritual darkness, divine separation, cosmic quarantine. And then God speaks, "Let there be light." This wasn't the creation of light itself. Celestial bodies had already been formed in Genesis 1:1. This was the reintroduction of light to a world plunged into darkness. Not creation, but restoration. When you understand this, Scripture's apparent contradictions resolve themselves. Science speaks of dinosaurs and ice ages that seem incompatible with a 6,000-year biblical timeline. But they fit perfectly within the gap, the unspecified time between the original creation and the restoration that began with Adam. The scientific discovery of multiple extinction events throughout Earth's history isn't a challenge to Scripture, it's confirmation of it. Each layer of sediment tells the story of judgment, cleansing, and renewal that Scripture hints at but doesn't detail. In 2010, anthropologists discovered human-like fossils that defied conventional dating methods. The scientific establishment quietly removed these findings from public view, claiming contamination of samples. But what if these weren't anomalies? What if they were evidence of beings who existed in that first world, the world before Adam? The Hebrew rabbinical text Besikta Rabbati states, "There were many worlds before this one, but they were destroyed." The ancient Jewish mystical text Bahir speaks of 974 generations that existed before Adam. These weren't speculative myths, but preserved knowledge of what once was. This revelation resolves one of theology's greatest tensions. How could a perfect God create an imperfect world? The answer: He didn't. The original creation was perfect. It was Lucifer's rebellion that brought chaos. And Genesis 1:2 shows us not the beginning of creation, but God's sovereign response to cosmic treason. This isn't just abstract theology, it's the key to understanding our present reality. The world we inhabit isn't pristine creation, it's restored territory. We live on spiritual battleground, a planet with history far darker and older than most realize. The implications are staggering. If the earth has already witnessed one divine judgment and restoration, couldn't it happen again? Jesus himself said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." When you understand the gap, you begin to see patterns, cosmic cycles of rebellion, judgment, and redemption that have played out before and are accelerating again today. The evidence surrounds us, but few have eyes to see it. The darkness that once covered the deep didn't just disappear. It was pushed back, contained, but not eliminated. And in our time, that darkness is resurging, not just metaphorically, but literally, as ancient powers reawaken and ancient knowledge resurfaces through modern technology. The world before Adam wasn't myth, it wasn't allegory, it was reality. A reality judged, erased, but not entirely forgotten. And understanding this forgotten chapter is crucial for navigating what comes next. Because the pattern is repeating. The cycle is turning. And once again, creation groans under the weight of rebellion. But this time, we've been warned. This time, we know what came before. The question is, will we learn from it before history repeats itself? Watchers and Nephilim, the cosmic corruption. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves from any they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. These verses from Genesis 6 have been whispered about in theological circles, reduced to footnotes or explained away as mere allegory. But what if they describe the most catastrophic boundary violation in cosmic history? A contamination so severe it necessitated the near extinction of humanity. In 1947, among the Dead Sea Scrolls, archaeologists discovered the most complete version of the Book of Enoch in existence. Though not included in most biblical canons, this ancient text was quoted by Jude in the New Testament and revered by early church fathers. Why was it eventually suppressed? Because it reveals in explicit detail exactly what happened when angels abandoned their proper domain. The Book of Enoch names them, the Watchers, 200 celestial beings who observed humanity from the heavenly realm, but were consumed with forbidden desire. Their leader, Semjaza, bound them in a mutual oath, knowing full well the cosmic law they were about to break. These weren't mindless beasts or simple messengers. They were high-ranking celestial officers, ancient beyond human comprehension, created perfect in wisdom and knowledge. Yet they descended. They crossed the boundary between spirit and flesh, took human form, and entered into unions with women. This wasn't romantic. This was calculated violation of divine order. And from these unholy unions came offspring unlike anything the world had seen before. The Nephilim. Giants is how most translations render this word, but this barely captures their nature. The Hebrew term implies those who fell or those who cause others to fall. These weren't merely tall humans. They were hybrids, neither fully human nor fully divine. Their DNA was corrupted at the most fundamental level. The archaeological record hints at their reality. From 1912 to 1914, excavations at Lovelock Cave in Nevada uncovered dozens of skeletons measuring 7 to 9 feet tall with distinctive double rows of teeth. Native Paiute legends spoke of red-haired giants who were cannibalistic and hostile. The Smithsonian Institution collected these remains, which subsequently vanished from their records. Similar discoveries have been documented globally. From the Catalina Islands to ancient Sardinia, from Ecuador to the Ohio Valley. Each finding quietly removed from public view, each analysis mysteriously discontinued. The Book of Enoch describes these beings in disturbing detail. They consumed vast quantities of food, but when human provisions failed to satisfy them, they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Their size was monstrous. Ancient texts suggest heights between 15 and 36 feet. Their strength and intelligence were matched only by their cruelty. But physical corruption was just the beginning. The true catastrophe was spiritual and intellectual. The Watchers didn't merely procreate, they taught. Enoch lists their forbidden sciences: metallurgy, weaponry, cosmetics, jewelry, astronomy, root cuttings, divination. Azazel taught men to make swords, shields, and breastplates. Semjaza taught enchantments and root cutting, pharmaceutical knowledge. Barakajal taught astrology. Armaros taught counterspells. Shamsiel taught sun signs. This wasn't education. It was premature technological acceleration, advanced knowledge given to humanity before we had the wisdom to manage it. The parallels to our time are chilling. We stand at a similar threshold of radical technological advancement: AI, genetic engineering, neuromanipulation. Are we repeating ancient patterns? Violence exploded across the earth. Genesis 6:11 states, "The earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence." The Hebrew word Hamas, violence, here implies not just physical brutality but systemic oppression and perversion of justice. Society itself became predatory. More horrifying still was the genetic corruption. The Nephilim bloodline began to intermix with pure human lineages, spreading their corrupted genetics like a virus throughout the population. This wasn't just sin. It was an existential threat to humanity itself, an attempt to erase God's image from his creation. God's response was catastrophic but necessary: the Great Flood. This wasn't merely punishment for wickedness. It was genetic quarantine, a desperate measure to preserve an uncorrupted human bloodline through Noah, who was described as perfect in his generations. Genesis 6:9. The Hebrew term tamim here specifically indicates genetic purity, not moral perfection. The floodwaters rose, the hybrid civilization was erased, and the Watchers who had abandoned their proper domain were imprisoned in a place the Book of Enoch calls Tartarus, a cosmic prison from which there is no escape until final judgment. But notice what Genesis 6 verse 4 says: "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward." This single phrase shatters the assumption that the flood erased this threat entirely. How could Nephilim exist after a global flood that destroyed all flesh? The answer is disturbing. Their genetic signature survived, either through one of the wives on the ark or through a second incursion of fallen angels after the waters receded. Numbers 13:33 confirms their post-flood existence when the Hebrew spies report, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." The Anakim, Rephaim, Emim, Zamzumim, These tribal names in the Old Testament all refer to giant clans that Israel encountered. King Og of Bashan had a bed 9 cubits long, approximately 13 to 14 feet. Goliath and his brothers were the last documented Rephaim in Scripture. But did their influence truly end there? Ancient cultures worldwide preserve memories of these beings, though their names differ. The Greeks called them Titans. The Egyptians recorded the reign of the Neteru before human pharaohs. The Sumerians described the Anunnaki who came from the sky. Polynesian legends speak of the Menehune. Native American tribes tell of red-haired giants. The Mayans recorded visitations from the feathered serpent beings. These aren't coincidental myths. They're fragmented cultural memories of the same entities described in Genesis. Memories so traumatic they were preserved across continents and millennia. More disturbing still is the evidence of their continuing influence. While the physical giants were eliminated, their knowledge, spiritual contamination, and possibly their genetics continued to ripple through human civilization. The Book of Jubilees claims that, after the flood, imprisoned watchers began teaching humans through demonic intermediaries, transmitting the same forbidden knowledge that corrupted the pre-flood world. Their methods changed, but their objective remained: the corruption of humanity, both physically and spiritually. The implications for our time are profound. If this genetic corruption was so severe that it required global cleansing, and if Scripture warns that, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man, then we must ask, how is this pattern repeating today? The answer lies at the intersection of ancient warnings and modern technology. We stand at a threshold the ancients would recognize all too well, and the stakes have never been higher. Ancient knowledge, secret societies, and modern technology. Have you ever wondered why certain symbols appear consistently throughout human history? The all-seeing eye, the pyramid, the serpent devouring its tail, the winged sun disk. These aren't random artistic motifs. They're fragments of an ancient visual language, preserved through millennia by those who never forgot what came before. In 1909, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavating Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a site that would revolutionize our understanding of human history. Carbon dated to 11,600 years ago, these massive stone structures predated agriculture, metallurgy, and even pottery. The question that haunts archaeologists: how could hunter-gatherers with primitive stone tools carve 20-ton monoliths with precision that challenges modern engineering? They couldn't, unless they had help. More disturbing still is the pattern these ancient sites reveal when mapped globally. Researcher Jim Allison discovered that sites including the Great Pyramid, Easter Island, Nazca, Angkor Wat, Mohenjo-Daro, and dozens more all fall precisely on a single great circle around Earth's circumference, mathematically impossible by random chance. This circle, inclined at exactly 30 degrees to the equator, suggests these weren't isolated civilizations, but outposts of a single global knowledge system. What force could coordinate construction across continents thousands of years before modern navigation? The same force Genesis describes, beings with knowledge beyond human capability. The ancient world understood this. The Greeks didn't consider their myths fictional. They built temples at exact locations where they believed gods had interacted with humanity. Native American tribes maintained strict oral histories about star people who provided knowledge in exchange for genetic access. The Egyptian hieroglyphs explicitly describe rulers who were part human and part divine. This knowledge wasn't lost over time, it was hidden. As monotheism spread across the ancient world, this forbidden knowledge went underground, preserved by mystery schools and secret societies. The Egyptian mystery schools, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Mithraic cults, later the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons. These weren't merely social clubs. They were guardians of pre-flood knowledge, maintaining traditions directly connected to the teachings of the Watchers. Their initiatory degrees, symbolic language, and architectural principles all preserve fragments of antediluvian science. In 1717, when Freemasonry publicly emerged in London, its founding document claimed lineage tracing back to before the flood. Most historians dismiss this as symbolic mythology. But what if it wasn't? The Masonic Royal Arch degree explicitly teaches that certain knowledge was preserved through the flood by Enoch, who inscribed secret wisdom on pillars of bronze and marble, one designed to survive fire, the other water. The ancient rabbinical text Sefer Raziel describes the Tablet of Hermes, a crystalline device containing all cosmic knowledge given to Adam, then passed to Seth, Enoch, and eventually Noah, who carried it aboard the ark. These aren't mere legends, they're fragmented memories of technological transmission. The symbols these societies preserve aren't decorative, they're functional. Sacred geometry isn't aesthetic, it's mathematical encoding of vibrational physics. Alchemical formulas aren't primitive chemistry, they're encoded transformational processes operating across multiple dimensions of reality. But here's the crucial question. Why has this knowledge been kept secret? The Book of Enoch provides the disturbing answer. Because this knowledge wasn't meant for humanity at our current stage of spiritual development. The Watcher's primary sin wasn't genetic tampering. It was transmitting celestial knowledge to beings unprepared for its power. Today, we're witnessing the systematic reemergence of this forbidden knowledge, but now packaged as scientific innovation. Our modern technological explosion isn't random. It follows a precise pattern prophesied in ancient texts. Daniel 12:4 predicted, "Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." The Hebrew term for increase here is rabbah, indicating not gradual growth, but sudden exponential multiplication. Exactly what we've witnessed since the 1940s. The parallels between ancient Watcher technologies and modern breakthroughs are uncanny. In 2003, the Human Genome Project completed the first mapping of human DNA. By 2012, CRISPR technology enabled precise genetic editing. By 2025, we'll likely achieve commercial germline modification, allowing permanent alterations to the human genetic code that will pass to future generations. This isn't just science. It's repeating the exact pattern Genesis describes, the modification of humanity's genetic heritage. In 2022, OpenAI released GPT-4, demonstrating artificial intelligence capable of passing bar exams, medical licensing tests, and creating content indistinguishable from human work. By 2026, experts predict artificial general intelligence that will surpass human capability in nearly every domain. The ancient Babylonian texts describe mouthpieces of the gods, objects that spoke with divine knowledge. We've recreated them in silicon and code. In 2021, Neuralink began human trials of brain-computer interfaces. By 2030, direct neural interfaces will likely enable thought-to-digital conversion. Ancient Egyptian texts describe caps of knowledge that transferred divine understanding directly to initiates. We're rebuilding them with electrodes and wireless transmission. This isn't coincidence, it's convergence. The Vatican's advanced telescope is named Lucifer, large binocular telescope near-infrared utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. CERN's Large Hadron Collider features a statue of Shiva the Destroyer at its entrance. NASA mission patches are filled with occult symbolism. Google's quantum computer is named Sycamore, the sacred tree in Egyptian mythology that stands at the boundary between worlds. These aren't aesthetic choices. They're acknowledgments by the initiated of exactly what forces they're channeling, and the timing is deliberate. According to ancient Hebrew chronology, we are approaching the end of the 6,000-year cycle from Adam. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism, explicitly states that in the 6th millennium, which began in 1240 CE by Jewish calendar, the gates of wisdom above and the fountains of wisdom below would be opened. Preparing for the 7th millennium, the Messianic age, we are watching, in real time, the unsealing of knowledge that has been kept hidden since the flood. The same technologies, the same boundary violations, the same pattern of accelerated advancement that Genesis describes before the cataclysm. None of this is random. The ancient Nephilim agenda didn't die in the flood. It went underground, preserved through secret societies, encoded in architecture and symbol, waiting for the appointed time to reemerge. And that time is now. The countdown isn't speculative. According to the Hebrew calendar, we are in year 5784. Only 216 years remain until the 6,000-year cycle completes. The number 216 itself is significant. It's 6-woro, the mathematical expression of the number of man taken to its fullest power. We are witnessing the final phase of a plan set in motion before recorded history, the complete reformation of humanity through technology, the fulfillment of the serpent's original promise, "You shall be as gods." The question isn't whether this knowledge is returning, it's what you will do now that you know. The ongoing war, spiritual forces behind world powers. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6, verse 12. In 2016, at the opening ceremony of the Gotthard Base Tunnel in Switzerland, European political leaders gathered to witness something extraordinary. What should have been a simple infrastructure celebration instead featured a bizarre ritual: dancers dressed as goats, a horned entity overseeing workers, and symbolic death and rebirth imagery. When questioned, officials called it Alpine cultural traditions. But those with eyes to see recognized ancient Baphomet worship enacted before world leaders who sat watching, untroubled. This wasn't an isolated incident. The 2012 London Olympics opening ceremony featured a massive figure resembling Baphomet rising over children in hospital beds. The 2015 CERN ritual featured mock human sacrifice on the grounds of the world's largest particle accelerator. The Denver International Airport is adorned with apocalyptic murals depicting global devastation and a single world ruler. These aren't aesthetic choices, they're acknowledgments. Territorial markers signifying which spiritual entities operate behind which power structures. Daniel 10 pulls back the curtain on this reality. When the prophet prayed for understanding, an angel was dispatched immediately, but was delayed for 21 days because the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. This wasn't a human prince, but a territorial spirit with enough authority to impede an angelic messenger. Only when Michael, the archangel, intervened could the messenger break through. This revelation is staggering. Nations have spiritual counterparts. Territorial principalities, fallen sons of God who rebelled with Lucifer, rule from the unseen realm. They influence governments, shape cultural values, and engineer historic events. They are the true powers behind empires. Consider how empires throughout history share uncanny similarities despite no direct contact. Ancient Rome, Imperial China, and the Aztec Empire all featured ritual human sacrifice, worship of ruler as divine, pyramid social structures, and identical architectural elements. These aren't cultural coincidences. They're evidence of consistent spiritual templates imposed by the same entities operating across continents. Today, these principalities haven't vanished. They've simply adapted their methods. Instead of single empires, they now control systems, financial networks, media conglomerates, technological infrastructures, pharmaceutical industries, educational institutions. The control is less visible but more pervasive. Physical territories have become digital and ideological territories. The World Economic Forum openly promotes stakeholder capitalism and a great reset where you will own nothing and be happy. International banking systems increasingly push toward cashless societies where every transaction can be monitored and controlled. Technology companies develop ever more invasive surveillance capabilities. These aren't random developments. They're coordinated movements towards centralized control. The ancient Babylonian model rebuilt with digital architecture. But here's what's crucial to understand. These entities aren't all-powerful. They operate within constraints. Their authority is permitted but limited, and they tremble at the possibility of an awakened humanity reconnecting with divine authority. This is why certain regions experience supernatural breakthrough, while others remain in spiritual darkness. The territorial assignment of principalities is real, and their influence manifests in regional characteristics. Areas dominated by addiction, violence, sexual exploitation, or occult activity aren't random crime hotspots. They're evidence of specific principalities establishing territorial strongholds. Yet throughout history, there have always been those who recognized this warfare and stood against it, not through physical weapons, but through spiritual authority. Consider the inexplicable spiritual power of the Black Church born in American slavery. By all logical measures, enslaved Africans should have abandoned the faith forced upon them by oppressors. Instead, they penetrated beyond corrupted religion to genuine spiritual authority. producing unshakable faith that not only survived centuries of brutality, but fueled the most successful non-violent resistance movement in modern history. Why? Because something in their collective DNA remembered. The ancient Jewish prophetic tradition speaks of scattered tribes regaining their spiritual inheritance in the last days. Many indigenous peoples carry oral histories of being descended from ancient Hebrew lineages. Recent genetic studies have found significant markers of Middle Eastern DNA among certain West African populations, precisely those who were disproportionately taken during the slave trade. What if this wasn't coincidence? What if the very people who walked through modern Babylon, Egypt, and Rome carry spiritual authority precisely because they've been tested in the crucible of these systems and emerged unbroken? Your spiritual DNA matters. Your ancestral resilience against these principalities isn't random, it's inheritance. But this war isn't just happening at global scale. It's intensely personal. The same principalities operating over nations target individuals. Your specific struggles, addictions, thought patterns, and spiritual blockages aren't random psychological phenomena. They're targeted spiritual warfare designed to neutralize your specific calling and authority. The areas where you face the most intense spiritual resistance aren't your weaknesses. They're signposts pointing to your most significant spiritual assignments. The enemy doesn't waste resources attacking what doesn't threaten him. This is why traditional therapeutic approaches often fail to resolve deep spiritual issues. Cognitive behavioral therapy has value, but it can't address principality-level warfare. Medical interventions help manage symptoms, but rarely touch the spiritual roots of affliction. These approaches treat the branches, while the true battle is at the roots. Jesus demonstrated the correct approach. When confronted with disease, he didn't merely treat symptoms. He addressed the spiritual authorities behind the affliction. Be bound, come out, be silent. He recognized that physical manifestations were evidence of spiritual realities. Your authority operates the same way. You weren't designed to merely survive these attacks. You were created to displace them with kingdom authority. This isn't metaphor. It's practical spiritual mechanics. When you declare truth over your mind, family, property, and calling, you're not engaging in positive thinking. You're exercising legitimate spiritual authority that makes principalities tremble. The awakening happening globally isn't coincidental. It's strategic. As these ancient systems reach their fullest expression, a remnant is simultaneously awakening to their authority. This isn't random timing. It's divine synchronization for the final phase of a cosmic conflict. You're reading these words because you're part of that awakening. Your spirit recognizes truth even when your mind questions it. That recognition isn't emotional manipulation, it's spiritual DNA responding to activation frequencies. Something in you knows who you really are. This is why certain groups face intensified spiritual warfare in this season. The most targeted communities are often those with specific spiritual assignments for this historic moment. The increased resistance you experience isn't punishment, it's evidence of your strategic importance. The principalities recognize what many still don't. We're approaching the final confrontation of a war that began before Eden. The spiritual boundaries are clarifying. The middle ground is disappearing. Each soul is being drawn toward its true allegiance. And you, reading this now, you've been positioned specifically for this moment. Your life experiences, your ancestral heritage, your personal gifts, even your deepest wounds have prepared you for a unique role in this cosmic conflict. The question isn't whether you're in this war. You are. The question is whether you'll fight unconsciously as a pawn or consciously as a warrior with authority. The awakening has begun. And despite what the principalities want you to believe, they're not afraid of global systems, political powers, or financial collapse. They're afraid of you remembering who you are. Awakening to your purpose, the call to spiritual warfare. You were born into this timeline for a reason. This isn't empty motivation. It's cosmic reality. In a universe billions of years old, your consciousness awakened in this precise generation, the most pivotal in human history. The probability of this random placement is mathematically impossible. You are here because you were positioned here, with purpose and divine intent. Every struggle you faced has been preparation. Every victory, every defeat, every moment of questioning has calibrated you for this hour. What seemed like random life events were actually strategic positioning. Nothing in your journey has been wasted. Every experience has shaped your spiritual perception and prepared you for this awakening. Your ancestral bloodline matters. The specific combination of genetics, cultural memory, and spiritual inheritance that converged to create you was divinely orchestrated. This is why certain truths resonate with you at soul level, while others around you remain asleep. Your spiritual DNA is responding to activation codes embedded in these revelations. The prophet Joel foresaw this moment. In the last days I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, your old men will dream dreams. This isn't referring to random supernatural experiences. It's describing the mass awakening of dormant spiritual DNA, the reactivation of capabilities originally intended for humanity before corruption entered our genome. The ancient Hebrew rabbis taught that Adam, before the fall, could see from one end of the world to the other. He could perceive spiritual realities without barrier. This wasn't mythology. It was biological reality. The spiritual senses we've dismissed as mystical or paranormal were once standard human capacity before our consciousness was intentionally dampened. This is why meditation, fasting, and prayer have been universal spiritual practices across all cultures. These aren't random religious activities. They're technologies for temporarily suspending the veil between physical and spiritual perception. They create windows through the barrier that normally constrains your consciousness. But now, something unprecedented is occurring. The veil is thinning globally. People with no spiritual background suddenly report increased intuitive awareness, synchronicities, dreams, and spiritual encounters. Children born after 2000 consistently demonstrate capabilities that previous generations labeled impossible or paranormal. The scientific community calls them indigo children or assigns them neurodivergent labels, but they're actually evidence of genetic restoration occurring in real time. This restoration isn't automatic or universal. It requires conscious participation. The activation of your spiritual DNA demands your engagement through specific practices. Intentional stillness. Modern consciousness is trapped in constant stimulation. Social media, entertainment, and information overload keep your awareness fragmented and superficial. True spiritual perception requires regular periods of complete stillness, not just physical quiet but mental silence. Start with just 12 minutes daily of total stillness, gradually increasing to 30 minutes. This isn't meditation as relaxation, it's consciousness recalibration. Information quarantine. Your mind processes everything you consume. The majority of modern media, news, entertainment, social platforms, is saturated with consciousness-suppressing frequencies. Implement a 21-day cleanse from all mainstream information sources. Replace them with scripture, nature immersion, and direct interpersonal connection. Watch how your perception shifts when the static clears. Spoken declarations. Words carry vibrational power that restructures reality. Principalities maintain control through lies embedded in your thought patterns. Combat this by daily speaking truth aloud. Not affirmations, but declarations. I am created in divine image with eternal purpose. My spiritual DNA is awakening. I carry authority against all darkness. Speak these with full voice daily for 40 days and watch what changes. Ancestral reconciliation. Unresolved trauma in your bloodline creates spiritual blockages. Research your family history, honor your ancestors' strengths, and consciously release their wounds. Many traditions practice ancestral veneration not from superstition, but from understanding that your biological lineage carries both gifts and burdens that must be consciously addressed. Sacred community. Spiritual awakening isn't meant to be solitary. Find others who perceive what you perceive. Meet regularly, share insights, and pray together. The Hebrew concept of minyan, that certain spiritual work requires at least 10 assembled souls, isn't symbolic. It's based on the amplification effect that occurs when awakened consciousnesses align their focus. As you implement these practices, expect resistance. Nightmares, unexpected conflict, health challenges, or financial pressure often intensify when you begin serious spiritual work. This isn't failure. It's confirmation you're making impact. Principalities don't waste energy attacking the ineffective. What we're experiencing isn't just another historical cycle. It's the convergence of multiple prophetic timelines. The end of the Hebrew 6,000-year cycle from Adam, the completion of the Mayan long count calendar, the Hindu transition from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga, and dozens more ancient timing systems that independently pointed to this exact generation for global transformation. The veils between dimensions are thinning. The ancient systems of control are desperate and overreaching. The spiritual war has intensified because we're approaching its conclusion. This is why extremes of both darkness and light are simultaneously increasing. The middle ground is disappearing as every soul is drawn toward its true allegiance. Your role in this cosmic drama isn't generic. You have specific assignments based on your unique design. Some are called as intercessors, those who shape reality through focused prayer. Others are revelators, those who perceive and communicate truth that breaks deception. Some are healers who restore what darkness has damaged. Others are strategists who organize and implement divine blueprints in practical structures. How do you discern your specific assignment? Look at where you've experienced both the greatest resistance and the greatest flow. The areas where you face disproportionate spiritual attack reveal your most significant threat to the enemy's agenda. The zones where you experience supernatural ease despite minimal effort reveal your innate spiritual gifts. This great awakening will not be televised. It's happening person by person, community by community, as consciousness shifts from institutional dependence to spiritual sovereignty. The systems designed to keep humanity distracted, divided, and disempowered are losing their grip as people remember who they truly are. The ancient watchers failed in their attempt to permanently corrupt humanity. The Nephilim bloodlines were judged and constrained. The principalities behind empires are facing their final defeat. But this victory isn't automatic. It requires your conscious participation. You must choose which reality you will empower with your focus, your words, your actions, and your prayer. Every thought you entertain, every word you speak, every action you take is either aligning with restoration or perpetuating corruption. There is no neutral ground in this final phase of cosmic conflict. Your consciousness is a battlefield, and your choices determine which forces gain territory. This is why you're reading these words right now. Something in your spirit resonates with this truth, because you were designed for this moment. The stirring you feel isn't emotional manipulation, it's recognition. Your spirit remembering its purpose. Your consciousness reactivating capacities that have been dormant but never deleted from your spiritual DNA. The darkness we're witnessing globally isn't evidence of defeat. It's the desperate escalation of systems that recognize their time is ending. Light isn't gradually overcoming darkness, it's instantly displacing it. A room filled with darkness for 1,000 years is transformed the moment a single match is lit. The match doesn't negotiate with darkness, it instantly changes the environment by its mere presence. You are that light, not metaphorically, but literally. The divine spark within you is part of the same fire that ignited creation itself. When you stand in the fullness of who you truly are, darkness has no choice but to recede. It doesn't require violent confrontation, merely the confident occupation of your rightful authority. The time for hesitation is over. The time for preparation has passed. This is the hour of manifestation. When those who know their identity and authority step fully into their assignments without apology or permission seeking. The principalities are terrified, not of your knowledge, but of your remembrance, of the moment when you fully realize who you are and what authority you carry. If this message awakens something in your spirit, don't dismiss it as interesting theory. Take immediate action. Begin the practices outlined above. Connect with others who are similarly awakening. Move from passive consumption of information to active participation in transformation. The greatest deception isn't that this cosmic conflict isn't real. It's that you have no significant role within it. Nothing could be further from truth. You are not a cosmic accident. You are not a passive observer. You are an essential participant in the most significant spiritual revolution in human history. The question isn't whether you're called. You are. The question is whether you'll answer. If this stirred something in your spirit, share it with others who are ready to awaken. Subscribe to receive more revelations that have been suppressed for generations but are now being unveiled. The knowledge wasn't lost, it was hidden until the appointed time. That time is now. And you are here for such a time as this. In a world filled with constant change and uncertainty, many of us over 40 have witnessed the accelerating transformation of society, from analog childhoods to digital adulthood, from community-centered lives to increasingly isolated existences. We've seen traditional values challenged and ancient wisdom dismissed as superstition. Yet something deep within us remembers truths that transcend trends and technologies. That restlessness you feel isn't midlife crisis, it's spiritual awakening. The inexplicable sense that there's more to reality than what mainstream culture acknowledges isn't delusion, it's recognition. Your life experiences weren't random, they were preparation. Every challenge, every victory, every moment of questioning has been shaping you for purpose beyond mere survival or success. The wisdom of our ancestors understood that life isn't merely physical. It operates simultaneously on multiple dimensions. The increasing anxiety, disconnection, and spiritual hunger in our society aren't just psychological phenomena. They're symptoms of souls remembering their true nature in a world designed to make us forget. Your deepest intuitions matter. Your spiritual experiences are valid. The connections you feel to something greater aren't imagination. They're recognition of realities our modern world has forgotten but cannot erase. As elders in this pivotal generation, we carry wisdom desperately needed today. Our lives bridge ancient understanding and future hope. We weren't born in this era by accident, but with divine purpose. The light within you matters more than you know. If this message stirred something deep within your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. This journey of awakening is meant to be walked together. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to join us as we continue unveiling truths that have been hidden for generations. Each week, we'll explore another dimension of this cosmic revelation. If you know someone who's searching for deeper understanding or feeling that inexplicable spiritual restlessness, share this video with them. It might be the catalyst for their awakening. And if this content has impacted you, please take a moment to like this video. Your simple action helps these suppressed truths reach more seekers in an algorithm designed to bury them. Remember, you were born in this time for a purpose greater than you've imagined.